Welcome back to the beginner's course for consultants. Now, in the previous lesson, I explained how to organize and how to run an implementation project as a consultant. And in today's lesson, I'll explain how to run a training project for a client, which is, I would say, quite different from an implementation project. And this training project can be a sub-project from an implementation project, or it can be a completely separate project on its own. Now, the problem with training projects is that you can't simply, put a couple of ideas in a PowerPoint presentation and be done with the whole thing. If you want to have a successful training, you have to do much more than that. So in today's lesson, you'll learn what are the differences between in-classroom courses versus live online courses versus pre-recorded online courses, and how these matter for consultants. Also, you'll learn what are the 6 steps that you need to deliver a training, no matter which kind of a channel you're using. And also, I'll explain a little bit about this learning by doing concept, which is also a kind of a training that you can use for your clients. So, after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on how to organize a training that will fit the needs of your clients perfectly, and also what would be the most appropriate channels through which you can deliver such a training. Okay, let's see first what are some channels or ways you can actually deliver a training. The first one, most traditional, is this in-person or in-classroom training, where you actually gather the whole group of people and then you deliver the training as an instructor or a trainer. And of course, the advantage of this kind of an approach is that you have people there in person and that you can actually interact with them much more easily than through some other means of, let's say, delivery of this training. Therefore, you as a trainer can go much easily into more depth with this kind of an approach. Now, the downside of this kind of a training is that it's pretty hard to actually organize, to get all the people in one room, especially if this company has several offices or if these offices are in different countries. The second approach is that you have this live online training, where you actually deliver your training in real time through, let's say, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any other of these online meeting platforms. Now, the advantage here is, of course, that you can more easily organize such a training because the attendees are not limited by physical presence. And the disadvantage there is that you can't really expect this higher level of engagement as if these people were really in the same room with you. And the third approach is that you have this pre-recorded online training, where you basically record videos up front and then upload them to a training platform and then deliver these videos to a targeted audience. Now, of course, the disadvantage of this kind of an approach is that you can't really have a direct interaction with these students, although you could have indirect interaction with them through email or through, let's say, some internal messaging systems like Slack or again, Microsoft Teams. But the biggest advantage is actually that this kind of training does not take too much time of these employees, especially if these videos are, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, and that you can very easily adapt your training to specific audiences, because you're not going to use the same videos for, let's say, IT department and senior management. And when you think about these 3 potential delivery channels, I'm not saying that one of them is the best. I'm saying that you have to take into account all 3 of them, depending on actually how you build your training. So, for example, if you're building a highly specialized training where you need a very deep interaction with the audience, then probably the first approach is the best, because this is where you will achieve results. On the other hand, if you're building a very basic, let's say, cybersecurity awareness training, then it can be actually delivered very nicely through an online platform via pre-recorded video. So bear in mind that you have all the 3 options and that you have to align them with how you build this training. And let me now explain you what are the steps in building a training program. Basically, to deliver a successful training, you have to go through 6 steps. The first step is to analyze the context of the company, so that you know within which, let's say, parameters you have to build this training so that it actually fits the company needs. The second step is that you define the audiences within this company and their specific needs, because each audience within a company will have different needs, and then you have to tweak this training for their specific needs. The third step is to write a training program or programs, which will then specify all the details on what you want to achieve and how you achieve these things for specific audiences. The fourth step is that you start building all of these training materials in whatever form they are needed for the selected channels through which you will deliver this training. The fifth step is that you define how you're going to measure if the training is successful. And then the sixth step, of course, is that you deliver the training and measure its performance. Now, let me go through each of these steps in more detail. Now, for analyzing the context of the company, you'll have to analyze several things. So first of all, how big is the company? What industry is it in? Because the training will look very different if this was, let's say, an electrical company versus, let's say, a high-tech SaaS company, or if this is a company of 5,000 employees versus 50 employees. Then you'll have to take a look at specific regulations or laws that are governing a specific industry. So, for example, if this is a critical infrastructure company in Europe, then it will have to comply with NIS2 and also local regulations regarding cybersecurity. And usually in these kind of regulations you will find some specific requirements for training. You'll also have to take a look at the results of a risk assessment, especially if you're doing cybersecurity training or awareness, because you will have to adapt your training based on these results of the risk assessment and put more emphasis on things or areas that are more risky. Of course, you'll also have to read internal documentation of this company. So if you are, again, working on a cybersecurity training, you'll have to read all the cybersecurity policies and procedures and make sure that you take into account all of those when building your training. Next, make sure that you take into account all the, let's say, demands or wishes or requirements from the senior management, because typically they do have something that they want to emphasize. So obviously this is something that you have to pay attention to. Then you'll have to analyze what kind of departments are there in the company, what kind of technologies are being used, what kind of people, what is the profile of employees working in this company, because all of these facts actually will help you adapt the training style and training delivery according to these specifics. And finally, you'll have to take into account the languages, because there might be a company that is present in various countries with various languages, and there actually might be cultural differences between these countries, so that you take into account all of these when you're planning your training. Now, the next step is to define audiences and their specific needs, and basically define also the learning objectives. And for that purpose, you'll have to analyze what kind of profiles you have in a company and who actually you will be creating this training for. So for example, you might have a separate training for the senior management, separate for middle management, and let's say separate training for particular departments. Or you might be actually creating only one training, or let's say security awareness for all the employees in the company. And then you have to define a framework against which you'll do the training. So you might do the training against, let's say, ISO 9001, or more general quality management training. Or you might actually have DORA, the cybersecurity regulation for financial industry, as basically a basis for all the departments. Or you might say that your purchasing department will focus on this sub-regulation from DORA, this regulatory technical standard, which speaks about how to handle suppliers, whereas your IT department will focus on this RTS, which speaks about security measures in information technology. And then you also have to specify if you want to focus on a specific area within some framework. So for example, if you're going for ISO 27001, you want to, let's say, deliver a specific training for statement of applicability. Then you also have to define in how much depth you want to go, depending on your audience needs. So is this going to be a training for beginners or intermediate level or advanced level? Of course, that will depend on how much knowledge do these audiences already have. And then also your customer might have specific, let's say, desires on what kind of an angle they want to put to this training. So if you're doing this training on ISO 27001 statement of applicability, they might be interested more in, let's say, how to connect it to the risk register, or they might be interested more in how to select the controls. So all of these things you have to analyze to create, I would say, a perfect training for your client. And then finally, you should define these learning objectives. So basically a list of things that you want to achieve with a particular training. So you could say that for this last example, that the learning objective is that you want the attendees to master the connection between statement of applicability and controls from the Annex A from ISO 27001. And then the next step is to define this training program. So basically this is a document where you define the most important, let's say, facts about this training that you're working on. So first of all, you have to define the channel through which you will deliver the training. So is this going to be a in-person classroom training, or live online, or pre-recorded videos through training platform? Then you also have to define, is this going to be a one-time training or a series of shorter trainings? Of course, you also have to define what is the duration of the whole training in total when you sum everything up. And then you should define the structure of your training. So perhaps you will have some kind of modules, and then within these modules you will have certain lessons. And it's always a good thing to actually map these lessons against the framework for which you're doing this training, and also map these lessons against the internal documents, meaning policies and procedures within this company that you will cover with particular lessons. And finally, you should decide on how the measurement will be done. So are you going to do some tests or quizzes or these kind of things? But I'll explain this in more detail in one of the next steps. The next step is to start creating these training materials. So if you are recording videos, then first you'll need to start writing a script, and then based on this script record videos. If you're doing this live online or in-person training, then you'll need PowerPoint presentations, where of course you will create these presentations based on the structure that you defined in previous step. You might also have some other materials that are important, like PDF documents, maybe Word documents, and so on, and all of those you have to prepare based on the training program that you created in the previous step. Now, when you're creating all of these materials, you have to try to actually engage those employees, those attendees as much as possible. So of course, if this is an in-person training or a live online training, you have to think of some ways that you actually expect from them to react to whatever questions you have. So this can be a really better learning experience for them. You can also achieve similar effect through training platforms for pre-recorded videos if you have some quizzes and these kind of things. You also have to plan these materials in such a way that they are highly relevant for a client. So the more examples you use from the company, from their company, they will learn, because they will see this as a more relevant for them. Okay, and then you have to define how you're going to measure the success of this training. So first of all, you will have to record in some way the attendance of these employees. You can do this manually if this is in-person training, or you can do this automatically through a training platform if these are pre-recorded videos. You also have to decide, of course, together with the clients, if you're going to do some kind of testing, or if you're just going to do some kind of quizzes. And also you will have to decide what kind of questions you will have. Are these going to be some kind of structured questions, like multiple choice questions, or are they going to be some more open-ended questions where they have to describe their answers, and then you actually conclude their level of knowledge based on such open-ended answers. You also have to decide, are you going to do this kind of testing through a written form, or maybe a verbal form where you actually have to discuss with the employees what they have learned. Or if you were teaching the employees how to use a certain tool, then you can actually test out if they really learned how to use this tool in a good way. So there are several ways to measure the effects of this training. And then the final step is really where it all comes together, where you actually have to deliver the training, and you have to measure and then report to your clients. Now, I'm not going to go into details here, but this is where you actually have to execute all the things that you were planning. So you'll have to follow your training plan, use your materials that you were creating, and then deliver them through the channel or channels that you defined. Of course, don't forget to measure, meaning that you use all of these testing methods or whatever methods that you were using, and that you create a report after the training is delivered towards the client so that they know exactly what were the results. Now, before I complete this video, let me just mention a little bit this concept of learning by doing. And basically, this is a kind of an alternative to traditional training. When I say traditional training, I mean these three channels of the delivery that I mentioned. And this learning by doing is a kind of a mixture between an implementation work and training work. So let me give you an example. Let's say that a client has a first management review coming up and they don't really know how to prepare materials for it. So instead of preparing all the materials yourself as a consultant, you should rather explain how this is done to, let's say, a security manager and actually take him or her by the hand and explain each material, how this is done, who it needs to be sent to, and so on. So basically you're teaching this person how to do it, not by actually organizing a training, but actually showing how the work is done so that this person can do this alone the next time. Now, in most cases, this kind of learning will be the most effective because it's the easiest for an employee to learn in this very practical way. Of course, for consultants, it's very hard actually to scale this kind of learning by doing because usually you don't have enough time to dedicate to each and every employee. So if you are seriously considering this learning by doing concept, try to see if the client is interested in this kind of, let's say, a learning approach. And you should also consider tools like AI because they can actually help you scale this kind of training. Okay, I hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions on how to organize a training, and I'll get back as soon as I can. And here are a couple of materials that will help you learn more, and you'll find the links below the video. So first of all, I have this advanced course for consultants where I explain more advanced techniques on how consultants can become successful. And there is a whole module that explains the managing of change and managing of culture change, which is not, I would say, directly related to training, but indirectly, because very often with training you want to enable some change in a company to happen, and you want to ultimately change a culture of the company in a better way. So if you're interested in these topics, take a look. There are a couple of lessons there. Second, I'm the host of this Secure and Simple podcast where I interview successful consultants, and there you will see several episodes on how consultants are actually creating their training, how they're using training sometimes also for marketing purposes, also what is this human-centric cybersecurity, and so on. So you'll see several topics that are of interest for consultants there. Also on my YouTube profile, you'll see a series of videos that explain how to build a training in more detail, so you can take a look at this series as well. And on Advisera website, you'll see a training platform called Company Training Academy, which helps consultants deliver these pre-recorded online videos to their clients. And on Advisera website, you'll see also Experta, which is an AI-based assistant for consultants and compliance professionals, which can also help you build any kind of training program and training materials. And in the next lesson of this beginner's course, you'll see how to handle audit projects as a consultant, meaning internal audits or second party or supplier audits. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos. And I publish videos about cybersecurity and compliance and governance on a weekly basis. Thanks for watching.